Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has called on Russia to agree to a 30-day ceasefire. He made this statement following a meeting with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. The Turkish leaders supported Ukraine's decision to agree to a ceasefire during negotiations with the American side in Saudi Arabia.
We consider it positive and important that Ukraine accepted the ceasefire during US-Ukraine negotiations. Now we hope that Russia will respond constructively to this step.
Erdogan also stated that Ankara is ready to facilitate potential negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in order to contribute to the establishment of a just and lasting peace. In addition, during a conversation with the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, which took place on March 16, the President of Turkey emphasized that Russia's war against Ukraine must end with a just and lasting peace. This was reported by Erdogan's press service on the X network. The statement notes that Turkey supports President Trump's decisive and direct initiatives to end the war. It has also become known that Recep Tayyip Erdogan is planning a meeting with Donald Trump at the White House and is already working on organizing it. This was reported by Bloomberg, citing sources. According to the publication, the meeting is expected to take place in April. According to Anatoly Pinchuk, chairman of the board of the Institute for Eastern European Security, Ankara is directly interested in resolving the war. This is due to the fact that the conflict is geographically close to Turkey's borders. The expert stated this during a broadcast on the Freedom Channel. However, it will be difficult to influence Putin's position and reach a peace agreement because of the ultimatum-like conditions set by the aggressor country.
The position of the Kremlin is quite aggressive, and it has become even more apparent now after the proposal for a 30-day ceasefire was put forward.
Anatoly Pinchuk notes that some compromises from Russia could theoretically be possible. For example, the aggressor country might agree to the presence of Turkish peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. However, according to the experts, such concessions are unlikely at this time.
It is the second largest army in NATO after the United States and one of the few alliance armed forces with real combat experience. Its military bases are scattered all over the world, and recently, Ukraine may also become one of those countries to host its troops. We are, of course, talking about Turkey.
The Turkish army is the second largest, more than in France, more than in the United Kingdom, more than, of course, in Canada, Italy, Germany, and other countries.
There have long been talks about sending Turkish troops to Ukraine as peacekeepers. However, we have never been as close to this as we are today. The presidents of both countries state that they are ready for such a scenario. And it seems that things are moving toward officially signing such an agreement soon.
Simply put, creating genuine European security without Turkey is truly unthinkable.
But what in reality can Turkey offer Ukraine? How capable is its army? What is the size of the Turkish armed forces? And how does Ankara plan to settle this issue with Moscow? How realistic are the prospects of a Turkish peacekeeping contingent in Ukraine? We'll tell you right now in Arsenal. Turkey has taken a pro-Ukrainian stance since the very first day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Erdogan has never once questioned Ukraine's sovereignty or territorial integrity. It was specifically Turkish drones that destroyed Russian armored columns as they approached Kyiv. It was official Ankara that provided the first platform for negotiations, helped broker the grain deal, and assisted in unblocking the ports of Odessa. For several years now, Turkey has been helping to free Ukrainians from Russian captivity. But now it seems Ankara has decided to strengthen this alliance even further by offering assistance with its own troops.
Turkey, which has declared that it is ready to take part in building a new security architecture in Europe, seeing what challenges and threats Europe is facing, seeing how transatlantic unity is being disrupted, how NATO is weakening, and this is supported by other European countries, primarily such as the United Kingdom, the Scandinavian countries, the Baltic states, and Poland. And in this architecture, naturally, Ukraine can also participate, right? And the formation of this Baltic Black Sea security arc can also play a huge significant role in the future and important security system.
The point is that Erdogan is in principle ready to provide his troops to be stationed in Ukraine, where they will oversee the approaching ceasefire regime.
Turkey is one of the countries that is not afraid to send its troops abroad. Turkey has military bases in Syria, is already preparing to go to Somalia, has military bases and a presence in Qatar, has bases in Libya and in a number of other countries. And Erdogan has spoken about this repeatedly, ready to send Turkish troops to Ukraine to stand on the borderline, so it would be clear who is violating the agreement. And this is what Putin is deathly afraid of.
He's afraid because from the very beginning he looks for loopholes to disrupt peace agreements. However, the Turkish contingent is the kind of guys the bunker dweller would want to quarrel with only as a last resort.
Turkey has the second largest armed forces among all NATO members after the United States. In other words, the Turkish army is the second largest in terms of personnel, larger than France, larger than the United Kingdom, and of course larger than Canada, Italy, Germany, and other.
Moreover, when we say larger, we mean it's a multiple advantage over the European armies. By and large, if a decision were made to deploy foreign troops in Ukraine, Turkey alone could provide a sufficient military contingent.
At present, the number of Turkey's ground forces alone is currently about 400,000 personnel, with an approximately equal number of reservists, that is 400,000 in the ground forces and 400,000 in reserve. Plus, of course, there are other branches of the military, the Navy, the Air Force, Special Forces, engineering troops, and so on. This is a tremendous force. Naturally, if we're talking about the need to send 30 to 50,000 service members to create a successful peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, Turkey could send such a contingent even on its own.
At the same time, and this is important, Ankara itself is quite willing to take part in creating a new security framework in Europe, as its president Recep Tayyip Erdogan has repeatedly stated.
Without Turkey, it is becoming increasingly difficult for Europe to remain a global player. Simply put, establishing European security without Turkey is unthinkable.
Another major advantage of Turkish military presence in Ukraine, according to experts, is Ankara's foreign policy course. Analysts predict that Erdogan definitely will not consult with Putin or ask for his permission to send troops. If the proposal is beneficial to Turkey, it will almost certainly accept it.
Mr. Tusk went to discuss precisely the role of Turkey in ensuring and guaranteeing the security of the southern part of Ukraine. In other words, we're talking about the Black Sea region. Here, the interests of Turkey and Russia don't exactly conflict, but they do contradict each other. That's why it's a big question to what extent Russia would even agree to such a format if we're talking about Turkish troops, especially since in terms of training, Turkish forces may actually be a more formidable force than the armies of many European countries.
Turkey's advantage also lies in the fact that it is perhaps the only country in the entire NATO bloc that is not critically dependent on the alliance's center in Washington. And it has long since taken care of its own defense capabilities independently.
The Turkish army is among the most prepared, most well-trained, and best armed forces in the alliance. Turkey has an excellent domestic defense industry. They are already producing, as we know, the excellent Bayraktar drones. They manufacture their own tanks and are close to creating their own aircraft. In short, this is a country with a fully closed production cycle for all types of weapons and the ammunition for them. And then there's the Navy. They have excellent shipyards. There are hundreds of shipyards, both private and state-owned, located in Turkey, which provide repair and shipbuilding services to hundreds of companies worldwide and produce excellent naval vessels, including, as is well known, for Ukraine.
Now, let's talk about why Turkey itself needs this. If we set aside the fact that the country will significantly increase its geopolitical importance, which is clearly what Erdogan is striving for, the economic benefits for Ankara from stationing troops in Ukraine are also quite obviously obvious.
Demarcation of maritime borders between Ukraine and Turkey is impossible as long as Crimea is occupied. This means that Turkey cannot extract its own gas in the Black Sea because part of that territory belongs to Ukraine. As long as the situation remains unstable, this is a huge loss for Turkey.
One should also not forget about its potential military-industrial advantages. After all, by strengthening its relations with Europe through supporting Ukraine, Ankara is opening up unprecedented opportunities in the field of weapons production.
Turkey is quite a large exporter of weapons. Of course, not on par with the US and China, but it does have significant defense industrial potential. Thus, Turkey and Europe can achieve much more together by combining European technologies with Turkey's manufacturing capabilities.
Moscow also understands where all this is heading, but they simply can't do anything about it. The only thing left for the bunker dweller is once again to send out his foreign ministry pawn, who will mumble something yet again about the Kyiv regime, which supposedly shouldn't be supported.
We strongly advise all responsible countries with whom we are currently in contact, Turkey being one of them, to carefully analyze the situation, to thoughtfully consider the constant and ongoing belligerent statements made by the Kyiv regime, and we also warn them against further fueling or encouraging these dangerous militaristic sentiments.
But when it comes to Turkey's position, such speeches simply won't make any impression on them. Despite official contacts with Moscow, Ankara will first and foremost do what is in its own best interest, and they have long since recognized the advantages for themselves of deploying a peacekeeping contingent to Ukraine. Did you like this video? Then don't forget to give it a like and be sure to subscribe to our new Arsenal channel. The link is in the description below the video.